What would you do if you overheard a conversation that could ruin a billionaire's empire? A struggling waitress faced that exact choice, risking her only job to slip a wealthy stranger a devastating warning. She expected to be fired. Instead, a $200,000 Maybach idled outside her crumbling apartment. The Wellington Steakhouse in downtown Chicago was the kind of establishment where a single dinner cost more than a month's rent for the people serving it. The air always smelled faintly of aged oak truffle butter and the quiet, undeniable scent of old money. For 3 years, Chloe Bennet had navigated the dimly lit dining room, carrying heavy trays of bone-in ribeyes and balancing towers of chilled seafood. She was 26, drowning in nursing school debt from the University of Illinois, and barely keeping her head above water in a cramped apartment in Pilsen. It was a rainy Thursday night, the kind of evening that brought out the city's heavy hitters. Chloe's manager, a perpetually stressed man named Thomas, had assigned her to the Roosevelt Room, a semi-private dining alcove shielded from the main floor by thick, sound-dampening velvet curtains. "VIPs tonight, Chloe," Thomas had hissed, adjusting his tie frantically. "Arthur Pendleton is in there. You know the drill. Flawless service. Do not hover, but do not make him wait. And whatever you do, don't let his guest get under your skin." Chloe knew Arthur Pendleton. In the cutthroat world of Chicago, real estate, Pendleton Commercial Properties, was a titan. But unlike most of the billionaires who frequented the Wellington, Arthur was a gentleman. At 68, with neat silver hair and a quiet demeanor, he always ordered a Macallan 18, neat, and treated the staff like human beings. He was a widower, and there was often a profound, quiet sadness in his eyes. His guest, however, was a different story entirely. Derek Whitmore was Arthur's chief operating officer, and supposedly his most trusted friend. He was in his mid-40s, wore suits that were a little too tight, and sported a flashy gold Audemars Piguet watch that he made sure everyone noticed. Derek had a habit of snapping his fingers to get a server's attention, and looking right through people who made less than 6 figures. "I'll have the Wagyu," Derek ordered loudly, not even glancing at Chloe as she stood at the edge of the table. "And don't burn it like the kitchen did last time. If it's over medium rare, I'm sending it back and you're paying for it." "Of course, sir," Chloe said, her voice perfectly level, despite the spike of irritation in her chest. "Derek, please." Arthur intervened softly, his deep voice carrying a tired edge. "There's no need for that. The Wellington has never served us a bad meal." He turned to Chloe with an apologetic smile. "I will have the Dover sole, Chloe. Thank you." For the next hour, Chloe executed her duties, flawlessly disappearing and reappearing like a ghost. The dinner progressed through appetizers and expensive wine. Whenever she entered the room, Derek was usually talking loudly about profit margins, aggressive acquisitions, and how he was handling the firm's new massive development, the River North Plaza. Arthur mostly listened, nodding thoughtfully, trusting the man sitting across from him. It was during the transition to the main course that everything changed. Arthur had excused himself to take a call from his daughter in the lobby, leaving Derek alone in the Roosevelt Room. Chloe, carrying a tray of fresh silverware, approached the heavy velvet curtains. She reached out to part them, but stopped dead in her tracks when she heard Derek's voice. It wasn't his usual booming, arrogant tone. It was low, hushed, and urgent. He was on his cell phone, pacing in the shadows near the corner of the room. "Listen to me, Harrison," Derek hissed. "I don't care what the board thinks right now. The board is blind. Arthur completely trusts me." Chloe froze. Her hand hovered millimeters from the velvet. Instinct told her to walk away, to go back to the kitchen and wait. But something in the venomous tone of Derek's voice rooted her to the floorboards. "The shell company in Delaware is fully operational." Derek continued, a sickeningly smug edge creeping into his voice. We have quietly diverted 30% of the River North capital into it. By the end of Q3, the project will default. Pendleton Commercial will bleed out, and Arthur will take the entire fall. His shares will drop to pennies. There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. She was standing barely 2 feet away, separated only by a curtain. If Derek walked out, he would see her. Exactly, Derek chuckled darkly. When the stock tank's Caldwell Equities swoops in and buys him out for nothing. I get my CEO seat at Caldwell, and Arthur gets a forced early retirement in disgrace. Just make sure the Cayman transfer's clear by Friday, before the audit. If Arthur sees the discrepancies before, then we're dead. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. Caldwell Equities was Arthur Pendleton's biggest rival. Everyone in the city knew that. Derek wasn't just embezzling, he was orchestrating a hostile takeover from the inside, deliberately sabotaging a billion-dollar development to ruin the man who trusted him. Suddenly, Derek's footsteps pivoted toward the curtain. Panic seized Chloe. She spun around and practically flew down the carpeted hallway, her heart threatening to crack her ribs open. She ducked into the waiter's station, just as Derek pushed through the curtains, looking around the hallway with a suspicious glare, before retreating back into the room. Chloe stood in the cramped station, clutching her serving tray so tightly her knuckles turned white. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps. What do I do? She thought, her mind racing. It's none of my business. It's billionaire corporate warfare. If I say anything, Derek will deny it. I'll look like a crazy person, and I'll be fired on the spot. She desperately needed this job. Her landlord, Mr. Henderson, had already taped a final warning notice to her door that morning. If she couldn't make rent next week, she and her 6-year-old rescue dog, Buster, were going to be on the street. She couldn't afford to play the hero, but as she looked out across the dining room and saw Arthur Pendleton returning to the table, an honorable man about to lose his life's work to a snake, her conscience flared with a heat she couldn't ignore. The rest of the service felt like a fever dream. Chloe moved on autopilot, pouring a $400 bottle of Opus One that Derek had ordered to celebrate their upcoming success. Every time Derek smiled at Arthur, raising his glass in a toast to their friendship, Chloe felt physically sick. She retreated to the back kitchen, staring blankly at the stainless steel counters. She had to warn him. But how she couldn't just walk up to the table and announce that his best friend was a traitor. Derek would destroy her. He had the money and the power to ruin her life, to ensure she never got hired anywhere in Chicago again. It had to be discreet. Chloe pulled out her small black leather server pad. She tore a crisp blank piece of Wellington stationery from the back. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she clicked her pen. She had to make it brief, specific, and undeniable. She thought back to the exact words Derek had used. Taking a deep breath, she wrote in sharp, clear print at Mr. Pendleton. I overheard your guest on the phone. He is working with Caldwell Equities. He mentioned a Delaware shell company, hidden Cayman transfers, and bankrupting the River North project by Q3 to force a buyout. Check the accounts before Friday's audit. Your Waitress. She stared at the note, terrified of the ink on the page. It felt like a bomb. She folded it perfectly in half, and then in half again, until it was a tiny, unassuming square. The time came to drop the check. The bill was exorbitant, over $1,500. Chloe placed the printed receipt into the heavy black leather presenter. Usually she handed it to whoever asked, but tonight she deliberately walked to Arthur's right side. She slipped the folded square of paper into the presenter, tucking it directly behind the slot meant for the credit card, ensuring he would have to touch it to pay. Thank you, gentlemen. Chloe said, her voice remarkably steady. "Whenever you are ready." She turned and walked away, but positioned herself near the wine station, pretending to polish a glass, while keeping her eyes locked on the Roosevelt room's reflection in a decorative mirror. She watched Arthur pick up the leather booklet. Derek was busy looking at his phone, typing furiously, probably finalizing the very betrayal Arthur was oblivious to. Arthur opened the booklet. He reached for his black American Express card, and as he did, the white square of paper fluttered out onto his lap. Chloe stopped breathing. The glass in her hand felt like it might shatter under her grip. Arthur picked up the note. He unfolded it. He read it. From the mirror's reflection, Chloe watched the billionaire's face. There was no theatrical gasp, no sudden slamming of fists. For a terrifying 10 seconds, Arthur Pendleton went completely still. His eyes scanned the few lines of text twice, maybe 3 times. Then the warmth in his demeanor, the gentle, tired kindness that he always carried, vanished. His jaw set into a rigid, stone-cold line. His eyes darkened, taking on a ruthless, calculating intensity that reminded Chloe exactly how a man builds a billion-dollar empire from the ground up. Arthur calmly refolded the note and slipped it into the breast pocket of his bespoke suit. He pulled out his credit card and placed it on the tray. "Everything all right, Artie?" Derek asked, finally glancing up from his phone, a greasy smile plastered on his face. "Perfectly fine, Derek," Arthur replied, his voice smooth, cold, and quiet. "Just thinking about Friday. We have a lot of accounting to look over." Derek chuckled, oblivious to the trap clamping shut around his ankle. "Don't sweat the audit, old man. I've got everything handled. You just focus on the ribbon cutting." "I know you do," Arthur said softly. When Chloe returned to process the payment, neither man looked at her. She ran the card, printed the slips, and brought the book back. When she returned later to clear the table, the men were gone. Inside the book, Arthur had left a $500 cash tip on top of the credit card receipt. There was no other message, no acknowledgement of the note. The shift ended at 1 a.m. Chloe changed out of her uniform, the adrenaline finally crashing and leaving her exhausted and terrified. As she took the rattling Blue Line train back to Pilsen, paranoia set in. What if Arthur didn't believe her? What if he showed the note to Derek, and Derek demanded the restaurant hand over the security footage to see who wrote it? She had risked her entire livelihood on a hunch that a billionaire would trust a waitress over his COO. She arrived at her dilapidated apartment building just after 2 a.m. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and damp carpet. She unlocked her door, fed a whimpering Buster, and collapsed onto her lumpy mattress without even taking off her makeup. Sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Derek's furious face, or Thomas firing her, or Mr. Henderson changing the locks. She tossed and turned, her mind spiraling into worst-case scenarios until the grey light of dawn began to creep through her cracked blinds. At 8 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was an automated text from her bank account, balance $42.18. Chloe groaned, rubbing her burning eyes. She dragged herself out of bed to make a cup of cheap instant coffee. She walked to her tiny living room window, pulling back the blinds to check the weather. Her breath caught in her throat. Parked directly in front of her crumbling brick apartment building, aggressively out of place among the rusted Honda Civics and dented pickup trucks, was a vehicle that looked like a spaceship. It was a massive, pristine, midnight black Mercedes Maybach S580. Its tinted windows reflected the grim, overcast Chicago sky. As Chloe stared frozen, the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. He was built like a tank, wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit and an earpiece. He didn't look around at the neighborhood. He looked straight up, his eyes locking directly onto Chloe's second-floor window. Then He pulled a sleek black envelope from his jacket and began walking toward the entrance of her building. A sharp, heavy knock echoed through Chloe's tiny apartment, rattling the cheap brass peephole. Buster, her terrier mix, began to bark, frantically, darting between her legs. Chloe stood frozen in the middle of her living room, her worn, oversized sweater suddenly feeling like a paper-thin defense against whatever was outside. She tiptoed to the door and pressed her eye to the glass. The hulking man in the dark suit was standing perfectly still, his hands clasped in front of him. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was holding the black envelope. With a trembling hand, Chloe unbolted the locks and opened the door a fraction of an inch. "Chloe Bennett?" the man asked. His voice was a deep, gravelly baritone, but surprisingly polite. "Yes." She managed to squeak out her knuckles white on the doorframe. "My name is Liam Gallagher. I am the head of personal security for Mr. Arthur Pendleton," he said, holding out the sleek black envelope. It was made of thick, matte cardstock, sealed with a silver wax crest. "Mr. Pendleton sends his deepest apologies for the early intrusion. He respectfully requests that you accompany me to his office immediately. Your employer at the Wellington has already been notified that you will not be attending your shift today or any day going forward with full compensation." Chloe's stomach plummeted. He got me fired. The thought hit her like a physical blow, but when she took the envelope and broke the silver seal, she didn't find a termination notice or a legal threat. Inside was a crisp handwritten note on heavy stationery. "Chloe, you saved my life's work. Please allow me to thank you properly. Liam will bring you to me. Arthur." 30 minutes later, Chloe was sitting in the back of the Maybach. The interior smelled of rich leather and cedar. The world outside the tinted glass was silenced, transforming the chaotic Chicago morning commute into a muted, distant movie. Liam navigated the massive car toward Wacker Drive, pulling into the private underground garage of the Pendleton Tower, a gleaming 60-story skyscraper of glass and steel. She was escorted up a private elevator that bypassed the lobby and opened directly into the penthouse executive suite. The space was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Chicago River and the sprawling city skyline. But Chloe barely registered the view. Her eyes were fixed on the group of people gathered around a massive mahogany boardroom table. Arthur Pendleton stood at the head of the table, looking significantly more exhausted than he had the night before. His tie was loosened, and a half-empty cup of black coffee sat in front of him. Flanking him were two sharp-looking individuals, a severe grey-haired woman in a navy pantsuit, and a younger man furiously typing on a laptop. "Chloe," Arthur said, his face softening with genuine relief as she entered. He stepped forward, offering his hand. "Thank you for coming. I know my methods this morning were imposing, but time was of the essence." Chloe shook his hand nervously. "Mr. Pendleton, I didn't know what else to do last night. I was terrified." "You did exactly what needed to be done," Arthur said, gesturing to the woman beside him. "This is Beatrice Sullivan, my lead counsel, and this is Simon Croft, our head of forensic accounting. When I read your note, I didn't want to believe it. Derek and I have worked together for 15 years. He was the godfather to my late wife's charity foundation, but a smart businessman trusts and verifies." Simon Croft looked up from his laptop, pushing his glasses up his nose. "Thanks to your specific mention of the Delaware Shell Company and the Friday audit, Mr. Pendleton called me at 2 a.m. We initiated a hard lockdown on the company servers. Because we moved in the middle of the night, we caught the digital trail before Derek's automated scripts could wipe the internal logs this morning. He was moving $40 million into offshore accounts by noon today." Beatrice Sullivan added her voice like cracking ice. "And he had already drafted the press release for Caldwell Equities to announce their acquisition of our River North assets. It was a flawless corporate assassination. If you had waited even 12 hours to tell someone, Chloe Pendleton Commercial would have been gutted. Suddenly, the heavy glass doors of the boardroom flew open. "What the hell is going on here?" a voice roared. Chloe instinctively stepped back. Derek Whitmore stormed into the room, his face purple with rage. He was wearing a $1,000 suit, but he looked completely unhinged. His gold Audemars Piguet watch caught the morning light as he slammed his briefcase onto the polished table. "My key card is deactivated," Derek shouted, glaring at Arthur. "My system access is locked, and the security desk tried to tell me I needed a visitor's badge for my own damn building. Artie, what kind of glitch is IT running?" Arthur didn't flinch. He slowly walked back to the head of the table, his posture radiating absolute authority. "It's not a glitch, Derek. You're locked out." Derek's eyes darted around the room, taking in Beatrice's cold stare and Simon's laptop. Then his gaze landed on Chloe. He blinked confused for a fraction of a second. She wasn't wearing her black and white server uniform. She was wearing a faded college sweater and jeans. "Who is she?" Derek sneered. "What is this, Artie? Some kind of intervention? You don't recognize her?" "Derek," Arthur asked quietly, "take a closer look. She poured your Opus 1 last night. You threatened to make her pay for your steak if it was overcooked." Realization washed over Derek's face. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him a sickly, pallid grey. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "She has better hearing than you anticipated." Arthur continued, his voice dropping to a dangerously low decibel. "She heard your phone call with Harrison Caldwell. She heard everything about the Delaware Shell Company. And because she possessed the courage to warn me, Simon spent the night tearing apart your financial firewalls." "Artie, listen to me." Derek stammered, his arrogance instantly evaporating into desperate panic. He held up his hands, taking a step toward Arthur. "It's a misunderstanding. Harrison is trying to frame me. Caldwell hacked our system to make it look like I initiated those transfers. Save it for the federal prosecutor, Mr. Whitmore." Beatrice Sullivan interrupted, holding up a thick stack of printed documents. "We have the IP addresses. We have the encrypted emails between you and Harrison Caldwell. We have the wire fraud footprint. It's over." Derek's eyes darted toward the boardroom doors. He took a step backward, flight instincts kicking in. "Liam," Arthur said softly. The hulking bodyguard stepped out from the shadows near the entrance, effectively blocking the only exit. Behind Liam, the boardroom doors opened again. Two men and a woman in dark windbreakers bearing the bright yellow letters FBI stepped into the room. Derek Whitmore, the lead agent, Special Agent William Bradley, announced, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, corporate espionage, and embezzlement. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." Chloe watched in stunned silence as the man who had treated her like garbage the night before was violently stripped of his power. Derek whimpered as the cold steel clicked around his wrists. He didn't look at Arthur as he was marched out of the penthouse, his career, reputation, and freedom destroyed in a matter of minutes. Silence descended upon the boardroom as the doors closed behind the FBI agents. Arthur let out a long, shuddering sigh, leaning heavily against the mahogany table. The adrenaline of the confrontation was fading, leaving behind the profound grief of a 15-year friendship revealed to be a lie. "I am sorry you had to witness that, Chloe," Arthur said, turning to her with a tired, gentle smile. "But I wanted you to see that your courage meant something. You didn't just save a company. You saved the thousands of honest people who work for me." I just did what I thought was right," Chloe stammered, still overwhelmed by the sheer scale of what she had triggered. But Mr. Pendleton Liam said I was fired from the Wellington. I really needed that job. Arthur chuckled softly, motioning for her to sit in one of the plush leather chairs. He sat down across from her, sliding the black envelope across the table toward her. Liam misspoke, Arthur corrected smoothly. I didn't have you fired. I bought out your remaining shifts for the year, and then I did a little investigating of my own this morning. Nothing invasive, just the public records. Chloe looked at him nervously. You are 26 years old. You are enrolled in the nursing program at the University of Illinois, carrying roughly $80,000 in student loan debt. And you live in a dilapidated building in Pilsen owned by a man named Gregory Henderson, who filed an eviction warning against you 2 days ago. Chloe felt a flush of embarrassment heat her cheeks. It's been a tough year, she whispered, looking down at her hands. Arthur's eyes softened, welling with unexpected emotion. My late wife Margaret suffered from ALS for the last 4 years of her life. During that time, we were surrounded by doctors and specialists. But the people who truly carried us, the people who showed Margaret dignity and grace in her darkest hours, were the nurses. It takes a special kind of heart to pursue that calling. He tapped the black envelope resting in front of her. I cannot allow someone with your integrity to be crushed by debt and a slumlord, Arthur said firmly. Inside that envelope is a certified bank draft that clears your student loans entirely. The tuition for your remaining semesters is prepaid in full. Chloe gasped, tears instantly springing to her eyes. Mr. Pendleton, I can't accept that. That's too much. I am not finished, Arthur said, raising a hand. I also had my real estate acquisitions team make a phone call to Mr. Gregory Henderson at 6 a.m. today. We offered him double the market value for your apartment building in Pilsen. He signed the paperwork an hour ago. Chloe stared at him, her mind completely failing to process the words. You bought my building. No, Chloe. Arthur smiled warmly. I bought the building, and Beatrice transferred the deed into a trust in your name. You own the building. You are the landlord now. You will live rent-free, and the income from the other units will easily support you while you finish your nursing degree. And I suggest your first order of business as the new owner is to forgive the late rent of your struggling tenants, as you know exactly how it feels. The dam broke. Chloe buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. The crushing, suffocating weight of poverty, the constant fear of losing her home, the anxiety of failing out of school. It all evaporated in a single instant. She wasn't just safe. She was free. Arthur stood up, walked around the table, and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. The world needs more nurses who are willing to stand up to bullies, Chloe. Now go home, study hard, and if Buster needs a bigger backyard, let me know. The next morning, Chloe woke up in her own bed. The damp smell of the hallway hadn't changed, and the blinds were still cracked. But as she sat up and looked around the cramped apartment, it looked entirely different. It wasn't a trap anymore. It was hers. She walked into the tiny kitchen, poured a cup of cheap instant coffee, and smiled. She had risked everything to do the right thing, terrified of the consequences. In the end, the truth hadn't just set Arthur Pendleton free, it had unlocked a future Chloe never dared to dream of. If you loved this story of karma and courage, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more incredible real-life dramas, and share this video with a friend to remind them that doing the right thing always pays off in the end. Leave a comment below. Would you have risked your job to warn the millionaire?